is utilitarianism? Utilitarianism belongs to a theory of morality that can be labeled as consequentialist. Consequentialism is a normative ethics that depends on the consequences of an action. This means that it is not driven by rules or a guiding principle. Instead, it measures the goodness and badness of an action based on the consequence it creates. For example, if I want to eat something that would make me full, should I cook or should I go to the food court and eat there? Both consequences may be the same, but some would argue that going to the food court is better because you can choose and eat good food. In utilitarianism, what matters is the result of the deed and not the deed itself. Utilitarianism is also a form of theological theory. Theology comes from a Greek word telos, which literally means end of the sense of goal, aim, or purpose. One characteristic of utilitarianism as an ethical theory is its emphasis on the pleasure and happiness or contentment that one can get from doing an act or form a particular cause of action.
The principles of utility. Jeremy Bentham coined that now famous phrase, principles of utility, denoting that essentially determining element of whether an act can be good or right is its utility or usefulness. To bring about desirable results or consequences, understood as pleasure or happiness. In the exact word of Bentham 1976, by utility is meant that property in any object whereby it tends to produce benefits, advantage, pleasure, good or happiness, or to prevent the happening of mischief, pain, evil, or unhappiness to the party whose interest is considered. Utilitarianism, as expounded by Mill and Bentham, aims at consequences which are good that everybody or the general public wants, and this is happiness or pleasure. As such, utilitarianism has also come to be known as a happiness theory. Mill defines a morality right act as one that tends to produce happiness. An action is right in proportion as it produces happiness or pleasure. On the other hand, an act is considered wrong if it tends to produce the reverse of happiness. The utility or usefulness of an act therefore is determined by the happiness or the pleasure that one can get from its performance. The greatest happiness principle. Utilitarianism in one sense goes back to the earliest beginning of history of ethical thought. In fact, Mill insists that it has been presupposed by practically all ethical philosophers starting from the ancient Greek, particularly Epicurus, 341 to 270 BCE, and Aristippus, 430 to 350 BCE, whose ethical schools were popular for their supreme emphasis on a pursuit of pleasure or happiness as a central meaning and reason of human existence.
How do we measure happiness? Jeremy Bentham came up with a smart way to figure out what's morally right by calculating pleasure and pain. He called it hedonic calculus. Imagine it like a checklist for making decisions based on happiness. Here's how it works. Number 1. Intensity. The stronger the pleasure, the better. Number 2. Duration. The longer it lasts, the better. Number 3. Certainty. If it's guaranteed to make you happy, it's a good choice. Number 4. Propinquity or closeness. Instant pleasure beats waiting forever. Number 5. Fecundity or more to come. Will it lead to even more happiness? Even better. Number 6. Purity. The less pain mixed in, the better. Number 7. Extent. The more people benefit, the better. So, next time you make a decision, ask yourself, which choice brings the most happiness with the least pain? That's hedonic calculus in action.
Act utilitarianism versus rule utilitarianism. Mill and Bentham are generally in agreement that the principle of utility should be the ultimate practical norm in assessing the proper course of action to take in any given situation, but they both differ in how to apply it in concrete cases. According to the standard version of the theory and the one that Bentham seems to advocate, act utilitarianism says that we should always act in ways that will maximize the total well-being of everyone affected. Alternatively, only the act that will, under the circumstances, produce the greatest increase in total well-being or the smallest decrease in total well-being is morally right. The primary emphasis and consideration then are on the particular act itself as done in specific context, whether it brings about the greatest amount of good or benefit in terms of pleasure and happiness to all parties involved. For Mill, the principle of utility gets applied to rules, not to particular actions. This is what has come to be known in ethical circle as rule utilitarianism. Rules are essential to ethics for they give us an easy and time-tested principle of conduct that can readily apply whenever we need to decide what we ought to do or not to do in certain situations. We need rules to tell us which way to go in terms of the way we behave. Quantitative versus qualitative pleasures. Bentham's formulation of the hedonic calculus to provide a quantitative calculation of the value of different pleasures where decisions are made into a simple exercise of addition and deduction at arriving at the final balance put him, rightly or wrongly, under the level of psychological hedonist. Bentham insists that we should not only pursue our own self-interest, but also that of the group or majority. The greatest happiness of the greatest number is for Bentham the top priority over individual happiness. On the other hand, Mill introduces a way of determining pleasure that is not just confined to quantity or amount, but more on its quality. Thus he claims that pleasure is of two types, quantity and quality. Pleasures differ not just in amount but also in quality. He says that pleasure of the mind or the spirit are higher than pleasures of the flesh and of the body.
Utilitarianism is a consequentialist moral theory that focuses on increasing net utility through actions that produce the most good. It emphasizes the social dimension of morality and has gained influence due to its emphasis on the greatest good of the greatest number. However, critics argue that it lacks intellectual allegiance and loyalty as it struggles to determine the exact consequences of actions, does not justice to minority rights, and may not consider the differences in happiness or pleasure for different individuals.